Hello, and welcome to Independence Through Power Seat Functions, presented by Linda Bollinger. This clinical educational webinar was originally delivered as part of a live global series written and presented by Sunrise Medical's Education and Motion team. My name is Angie Kiger, and I'm currently the Clinical Strategy and Education Manager at Sunrise Medical US. Throughout this webinar, you will be hearing my voice, as I served as the moderator for this series. We appreciate you choosing to watch this recorded on-demand version of the webinar. On behalf of the Education and Motion team, here's Linda.
Well, hello everyone, and good morning to those who are on Australia, and good evening to those on the East Coast. And just before we get started, I just have a little content disclosure, and that is that this content was developed by the Global Clinical Education team. And although there are some pictures in the presentation, we don't intend to endorse any model, brand, or product or manufacturer. But this was a global effort, and I appreciate my colleagues and their participation in the development. A little bit about myself before we get started. I am a physical therapist. I was born and raised in Long Island, New York, and been there my whole life. And graduated from LIU Brooklyn as a physical therapist well over 30 years ago. And I spent most of my career at UCP of Long Island, where I was a rehab director and ran a seating and mobility clinic there. In about 2014, my daughter was going back to school and going to college, and I got the bug to go back to school, and I did graduate from Utica College with my DPT. I don't know why I decided to do that, but it was a great accomplishment. Shortly thereafter, my husband was transferred to California, which is where I am today. I became the clinical education manager of the West Coast for Sunrise Medical, and at the fall of 2018. So that's a little bit about myself, and I guess I'm wondering, where is everybody from who's attending the webinar?
All right. I've had a few people checking in for us on the comments, but Linda, I'm going to launch your official poll right now, guys. Hold on one second. You're going to see a poll come up. Please bear in mind a few things. We are at the mercy of the internet these days. So as far as speed goes, it could be an issue if there are connection issues. There's unfortunately not a lot we can do about that, but just bear with us. For the poll, where are you calling in from or watching from? North America, South America, Asia, Europe, Australia? Let us know. I'm going to give you a couple more seconds. Looks like we've got a good percentage of the voters voting in. We apologize. I did receive some contact with GoToWebinar a couple weeks ago. The polls aren't foolproof everywhere across the world, we've been told. So there is a glitch, and we definitely apologize if your answer is important to us, but unfortunately, not everybody's been able to vote, and it's an internal glitch for them. All right, Linda, I'm going to close the poll now, and I'm going to tell you the results of who we have calling in here. Let's see. We've got 83% are from North America, 2% from South America, 3% from Asia, 4% from Europe, and 9% from Australia.
Wow, well, it seems like a lot of us are from North America. I guess the hours make it great for that, but we do welcome everybody. And I hope that if my terminology is specific to the North America, that you would, let us know in the chat. We'd love to hear some of the feedback regarding that. And so that's great. Welcome, everybody. And so, Angie, if you'd like to just take on the next poll that I have to learn about our audience.
For sure. This is a very important one, guys. When our information goes out on social media, we do, pretty much invite everybody. One quick thing to note there, supplier. Sometimes in various countries that is referred to as dealer. In the US, we typically use the term supplier, so one little thing there. And just let us know who you are, what you do, and would love to hear about that. Give you guys a couple more seconds to click in and vote. All righty, Linda, I'm going to close this poll now. Thanks, everybody, for voting. Let's see. It looks like we've got 62% are therapists that assist in evaluations, 4% are therapists, but they don't recommend equipment. However, they have users who do utilize the equipment. 33% are suppliers, and we do have 1% as a caregiver, Linda. and 0% unfortunately for end users, but shout out to that caregiver. You guys do make a big difference in this world.
Well, I hope to be able to address any of the topics so you can integrate it into your practice, and it's great to know that we have a good representation from the field for that. So the objectives for today. Upon completion of the course, we hope that you'll be able to list and describe at least 5 power seat functions, articulate 3 clinical benefits of power seat functions, and integrate those at least 3 additional considerations when you're making power seat function recommendations. As a reminder, seating goals. One of our seating goals would be for skin protection, to manage pressure, control that microclimate, the temperature and moisture, and reduce that shear and friction. Another goal is postural support, and that would be accommodating those non-reducible orthopedic asymmetries, correcting any that are reducible, and then providing postural support or positioning for the function. And then don't forget about those physiological goals of respiration, digestion, and elimination. So power chairs can come with 2 different types of seating systems. You have your captain seat and your rehab seating. So those captain seats, they provide comfort and convenience, but they don't address those orthopedic asymmetries or the pressure management, and don't really offer any positioning for function or physiological. And they're basically standard sizes, configurable. And they look like a seat on a boat, thus the name captain seat. The rehab seating, though, on the other hand, is what we can accept off-the-shelf cushioning and backs, accepts the custom seating, and you have that adjustability and configuration, and it really will address pressure management and those asymmetries and function. And that would look something along the lines of this. So we're not really going to go into the seating system, but we want to realize that the goals that we have are achieved by the combination of the seating system and the power seat functions. The seating system is designed for a static position, so it's important to think about how will the seating system be affected by that power seat functions? How are they going to integrate? Just imagine, what would happen to lateral trunk supports, or what would happen to the head support or any of your alternative drive controls when you move a static seating system and you move it or change the angles of them. So as we go through each of the functions, that's just something that I want you to keep in mind is what would happen, and we'll try to address it throughout. So what is the level of comfort or experience with just describing power seat functions? Angie, if you can launch that final poll.
Absolutely. Let's see here. We've got a few different questions, different options for you guys to click on once again. What's your level of experience? Are you a newbie hoping to gain some comfort during this webinar when it comes to power seat functions? You're somewhat comfortable, but there's always more to learn. Very comfortable, but a refresher is always good. Or you work with power chairs, but you don't necessarily prescribe them. I'd say for me, Linda, in case you're curious, I'm going to go with C for me. Very comfortable. Refresher is always good. Awesome. Let's see what your audience is saying here. I'm going to close the poll in another 2 seconds. I gave everybody exactly 30 seconds to respond. And it looks like you're 20% are newbies, 32% feel they're somewhat comfortable, and 38% are very comfortable, with 10% saying they work with power wheelchairs, but they don't necessarily prescribe them specifically.
Okay, well, this is the thing. I hope that there'll be key takeaways for everybody, no matter what their experience is. And so, we try to gear this to a wide range of audience. And again, hopefully you'll all have a takeaway, even you, Angie.
I know I will.
So let's dig deeper a little bit into examining power seat functions. Power seat functions include that tilt, power recline, shear reduction, power adjustable seat height, power stand-up, power elevating leg supports or elevating center mount platforms, and adjustable leg length. And what does that mean? Power seat functions use an actuator to move or change the position of the seat or a component of a power chair. Variety of medical and or functional purposes include a variety of configurations, and it's rapidly evolving right now. It's really, we're seeing a lot of changes in design and development and funding as well. And so this is where you want to reach out to your trusted advisor to find out what's the latest and what's the situation with the funding per your location in your region. Users are definitely excited to be able to use power seat functions, but they're frustrated sometimes with the limitations that they have and also the lack of being able to, always acquire them. So this is really a topic that we want to advocate for and reach out to your trusted advisors. So what can we expect? What are our clinical outcomes of using power seat functions? I categorize this into medical, functional, and quality of life. So for those medical outcomes, we're thinking about decreasing pain, redistributing load or pressure, managing tone and spasticity, managing edema, that respiration, digestion, and elimination, postural alignment, being able to support the trunk, and again, that accommodating or preventing orthopedic asymmetries. Functionally, it helps to provide independent repositioning. They help us with our mobility-related activities of daily living, such as transfers. And then think about the quality of life that one can get out of using power seat functions. Being able to relax or increase their arousal depending on their position. The psychosocial benefits of having eye contact or improved communication because of being able to hear and see one another. And then think about even the social activities or vocational activities that you could gain just by changing someone's position or being able to independently change your position, and improving your accessibility by not being in one single position. So when you're trying to come up with your clinical reasoning, you could start thinking about what are all my medical benefits, what are my functional benefits, and what are my quality of life benefits. And so each of the power seat functions that we talk about today, we'll touch upon a little bit of each of those. So what is power tilt? This is probably one of the most common recommended power seat functions, but what actually is it? This is when the angles of the chair, the seat to back and the thigh to lower leg stay essentially the same, but the tilt system changes its orientation in relationship to the ground. Traditionally, that's going to occur posterior or anterior in the sagittal plane, but it could also occur in the oblique or coronal plane, the lateral rotations. So you can imagine you could still shift someone over with the technology. All of that would be power tilt. What is the benefits of power tilt? Again, let's think about the great pressure distribution, being able to independently get your weight off your buttocks and onto your trunk, onto your back, and then that management of spasticity, okay? Improving that respiration and digestion and elimination. If you can think about someone whose head might be getting the effects of gravity by being forward, if you can tilt them back, you might be able to improve some head control. Improving driving skills when using the power chair. Perhaps it's a matter of being tilted back for that improved head and trunk control, or perhaps there's a position when they're not in an active and then another position when they're actually driving. It's being able to alternate what you need to do for the benefit of driving. Postural stability, being able to use gravity to assist and help us, and increasing sitting tolerance. Throughout the day, sometimes you'll hear someone in a power chair, you'll hear the click, the click, the click all day, because they're just like us who are able to move ourselves. We're moving all day. We're switching our legs. You can get multiple different positions throughout the day to increase your sitting tolerance. And then accessibilities to doorways, and I often think of accessibility to the van entrance. If you have a low entrance to your van and you're up a little bit high and you just tilt back a little bit to get that clearance, that can improve your accessibility as well. Just some clinical considerations, and that would be, number one, the loss of that visual orientation. If I'm tilted back, where am I looking? Up at the sky. And so that can be a negative benefit, a negative effect of power tilt. Also, There is a decrease in social interaction when we're in a tilted position. Sometimes it's a matter of people think that you're resting because you're tilted back, or maybe you're not necessarily focused on what's going on around you when you're in that tilted position. So that's something to consider. And what happens to your lower legs when you're tilted? They raise up, and so it might make accessibility to tables a little bit more difficult. One thing that you would also want to be thinking about, and that is, what can you do in the reverse or anterior tilting? Number one, taking someone out of a tilt and being upright. But if you even put a little anterior tilt, can you assist that person for transfers by having them lower? Can you create a position of activity or readiness by being forward? And will that maybe facilitate some trunk extension as well? The next power seat function that we're going to talk about is power recline. And you can see in the picture that that's opening up that seat to back angle. It provides a constant angle with respect to the ground and then opens up the seat to back. It's often used in conjunction with the elevating leg support or platform, and it doesn't necessarily include shear. So if you're asking for power recline, you want to be thinking about whether you need shear reduction as well. And we'll talk a little bit about shear in a little bit. But power recline, you know, for a long time, I didn't recommend power recline because of the effects that it would have on positioning, but I really started to eventually really find the benefits of it to be greatly, and so I started to order that a lot more. And so what are the significant benefits? Pressure distribution. Really does have more pressure distribution than tilt alone. Even then, tilt. It decreases fatigue. If gravity is starting to create fatigue of the trunk and you just open up a little bit, you have a more relaxed position and you can reduce some of that fatigue. Again, increasing that sitting comfort, being able to change your position throughout the day and kind of tweak to where you feel comfortable. Bladder management, just being able to open up and improve the elimination process is great with using recline, and also the ability to get catheterization, right? And so that's a really great benefit of that rationale, the functional benefit with catheterizing. Muscle tone management, sometimes just being able to open up will reduce some of the tone, so you want to be thinking about that. And then if you can imagine opening up and reclining to a fully supine position to either do your own slide or have a two-person slide to perhaps a bed or a mat, really gives you some benefits when you use recline. And again, don't forget that it's not just the process of opening up, but it is also the process of closing. So you can bring a person who maybe wants to be in one position for most of the day, but then when you turn it into a more closed position, you can get them more active towards the table, maybe for mealtime or laptop work or something like that. Just again, some considerations, just the change of using power recline. You may see somebody lose their balance when you're going through that. And then what happens when you open that back? Does the pelvis slide? Do they come out of position? And if they do come out of position, what then happens with postural supports and driving controls, either reaching for the joystick or even what happens at the head in terms of if they're using a head support or driving with their head. So when you use recline without tilt, that sliding can lead you to some tissue damage because of shear. Again, we'll talk about that in the next couple of slides. So as far as independence, one thing that's great about tilt and recline is using them together. The advantages of using them together include tone reduction. If you can tilt somebody prior to reclining, if there was a tendency to get into an extensor tone, you might be able to reduce some of that. Also, getting that pelvis back with tilting reduces out some of that sliding and the effects of shear. When you use tilt and recline and then even add power elevating leg supports, then you get even more control of edema. You can actually get into that astronaut position where your feet are above your heart. So really effective control when you use them together. And then if you think about the combination of tilt and recline and how many different positions somebody can get in for their comfort and their function, they can start to tweak their comfort and they can actually start to tweak their position for doing tabletop activities, for eating, and some of the other functions that they want to perform. And then again, refining that position to access either the technology on the chair, such as the joystick or the head controller, or even accessing tabletop technology. So additional considerations for power, tilt, and recline is that the benefits of using them together for pressure relief. So what we know is that tilt when used alone needs to be greater than 25 degrees to achieve pressure relief and or tissue perfusion. But what we do see is that the greatest reduction of pressure is when they're used together. So with a tilt angle of about 35 degrees and recline of 100, or tilting at 15 to 25 with a recline of 120. We also know that performing a tilt for 3 minutes or more is more effective than 1 minute. And so what we're really saying is that we want to be able to reduce those peak pressures at the sacrum and IT, but to do that, we know that greater angles of tilt and recline generally provide better pressure relief. So when we take the combination of this is what we really want to be encouraging for someone that's vulnerable to pressure injury. But on the opposite side, if left to our own devices, most users will likely not use those angles or that time. They basically will tend to use angles of 5 to 15 degrees or recline angles of 95 to 100. And they generally don't like to stay back for 3 minutes, which seems short, except for when you're back there and you want to be engaging with your peers and your colleagues. So I want you to remember this and think we'll address some ways that we can handle getting these better angles of tilt and recline a little later on in our independence. So anti-shear, what is it? So shearing occurs when you have the trunk resting on a back support, and as the back reclines, the weight of gravity pulls the trunk onto the back support. That opening up, right, causes the back to slide down. So what happens sometimes is that the bone starts to slide and the skin goes along with it, and you get friction from the back sliding along. But other times, because of the way gravity is pulling down on that, the tissue stays in one spot, and as the bone comes, the tissue doesn't come with it. And so you get internal shearing, which can lead to full thickness pressure injury. So what we want to try to do is prevent that, right? And so how do we do that? With power shear reduction. This is often called anti-shear. It features 2 back panels. And so what happens is, just as my hands were going, is that as the back opens up, the anterior panel slides and stays in contact with the trunk. So you don't get the effects of friction because you're not getting the sliding along the back, and you're also not going to get the effects of shear because the tissue and the bone are going to move together. Another secondary effect of that is that because the back is essentially lowering, the trunk supports and the head supports will stay in the right location. So you don't get that effect of the trunk laterals moving up. And this is one of those critical places where we talked about whether the seating system integrates with the power seat functions. Recline was one of those areas that I always struggled with recommending when I had custom seating because of the location of things. With good power shear reduction working, you really get a great benefit of that. So the benefits are the reduction of friction and shearing, the ability for that trunk support to stay in the right spot, right? And for the head support and all the alternative drive controls to remain in the proper location. You really want it to be a coordinated effort during recline, and this, because of that, sometimes people feel a strange sensation when that back is laying down, but it definitely they get used to it, and that benefits are really great for that. But just something to be mindful if they say they don't like it. Power adjustable seat height is just what it says, right? And there's a picture of a seat in an elevated position. So this is the ability for the seat to raise and lower without changing the angle. So you set your angles and then you go up and down. It's sometimes referred to as a seat elevator, which we discourage because really a seat elevator implies a more traditional elevator, and it feels like it's a luxury. And when we know about the benefits of power adjustable seat height, we realize that this is not a luxury, and really many, many people can benefit from it. It's not only used to be elevated, but it is also used to go down lower. So we want to be thinking about really this, about getting that person in that sweet spot for the height that they want to be at. Benefits. Transfers, being able to put yourself at the right height for transfers. Reaching, being able to reach things that you didn't normally weren't able to get to because they were too high. Over time, if you're in a lower seat and you're always looking up, we see issues with cervical lordosis, muscle spasm, and so if we can reduce the effects of looking up by having the person raised to a proper height, that's really a great benefit. And improved eyesight, being able to see over and at with someone. And the psychological effects of being in a lower position and having people looking down can be taken care of. And just one other thing is to remember the pediatric patient, just thinking about someone being able to be at peer height with their kids, their friends, and then being able to be at the dinner table at a higher seat height later on. So that's a really great opportunity there. Just note that speed often slows down when you're in that fully raised position, and you might feel a little unstable, a little tippy, and just you'll think about those. Power standing, again, this is a great opportunity for people to be able to start standing programs. It's using a standing feature integrated into the power system so that you can get weight bearing and not need to have another standing system. The seat surface moves from the horizontal to the vertical position while maintaining and then extending the knees and the legs into full standing. You get to change the weight-bearing surface from the buttocks to the lower extremity. Great opportunities here. So what are some of the other benefits of standing? Improved bone mineral density. All of the things that you get with a standing program and that isn't moving, you can get with this, right? Bone mineral density, managing contractures, pain reduction, just being able to open up gets you able to reduce some pain. That vital organ, opening everything up, being able to get all of those organs working, managing spasticity, again, changing range of motion really does help that. Pressure management, we're getting all of our weight off of our buttocks and onto a weight-bearing surface of our legs. Peer eye level to our peers, improving accessibility. Recreation, events, and activities, if you can just start to think about opportunities where activities that you go to that are basically standing. I could think of concerts or going to a high-top bar and being able to be standing, or going to work. The psychosocial benefits of being able to stand and walk with your peer while you're driving is really great as well. And then reducing the caregiver workload in terms of assisting in transfers and pressure release, but also being able to adjust things like clothing, being in that standing position. Things to think about are, if you're in standing, what happens to that sacral? By getting weight, do you wind up sliding down? Does it create shearing? You want to monitor for signs of orthostatic hypotension or stress. And if there's an asymmetry in your assessment and the person is not flexible and can't feel, are they appropriately positioned when they're in that standing position? So you want to create a program and modify that schedule based on what you're noticing here. And for someone that hasn't stood in a long time, you may want to get physician approval. So before I start anyone in a standing program, you want to be thinking about, are there existing contractures? Can they tolerate that hip extension and knee extension? What's going on with the asymmetries? Are they fixed? And do those positions limit proper alignment? Has the person stood ever? How long has it been since they stood? Do they need medical clearance to really to give an okay for the standing program with x-rays or bone density assessment? Maybe they have a history of osteoporosis, and so you want to weigh that with the decision to go with a standing. There's postural hypertension, looking for signs of distress, clamminess, sweating, blood pressure lowering. And begin slowly and start adding frequency and duration. And you may not even want to start with a full standing in the beginning, and maybe work your way up to that full standing. So power elevating leg supports and center mounts are not interchangeable, although they do the same thing. They extend the knees. So, but you can see here I have a picture of a foot support and a center mount. And what these do is definitely extend or flex the knee, right? It can be with either an articulating or non-articulating. If it's articulating, it will extend outward as as the leg is being raised up. And this is good to prevent, to allow for the full length of the leg and prevents hip flexion, so you get nice extension there. It does need a dedicated motor so that it can extend or flex without the tilt and the recline. And why would you need that? Pain management, just being able to extend those knees out, reducing lower extremity edema, although we do know it's best when we're in that full pressure, that full extended and tilted position. But it does improve circulation just by having gravity eliminated, accommodating a contracture or a splint or cast, and then just as a secondary support for repositioning. Realize, though, that you need to have adequate hamstring length to use elevating leg supports. And if not, you might want to consider using it with that recline so you can accommodate the hamstring length. And you really do want to decide between that center mount platform or the low, with regard to the lower extremity placement. If you go with a center mount and your feet are inward, does it create like a frogging effect or an abduction and externally rotating it? Or if you go with the elevating leg supports, are you too far abducted? Again, based on your client or needs, you'll make that decision. And then the other impact that this might have is for transfers. What happens to the platform? How is the person being transferred? If you're using a swing away elevating leg support, does it interfere with bathroom accessibility? So you want to play around with that. And so this is something that I wouldn't assume. I would really want to do a trial on either one of them. Lastly is our power height adjustable leg. And as we talked about that component in the articulating leg supports, we also have power height adjustable legs. And that's being able to lower the foot plate down or raise it up. Raising it going down to maybe could assist in stand pivot transfers, or raising it up to maybe to get over obstacles. Just getting that spot that you need. And some people might use it even to accommodate orthotics. Considerations are to be considerate of whether the foot plate is on the floor, whether it's tripping hazard, or whether it's appropriate for weight bearing. So sometimes if you put it down on the floor and a caregiver comes by, they could trip it. Other times I've seen it be left on the floor and someone drive off with it. So you really want to make sure that they know where it is. And then also returning to position. You want to make sure that you have proper weight bearing afterwards. And so think about maybe a memory seat that can assist you in that. How does the adjustability affect transfers and accessibility? So just to give you guys a little opportunity, I've been talking a lot. If you have any questions, feel free to put that in the chat box and I'll absolutely get back to you with the answers to that. But now we're going to look at how we can integrate the power seat functions to make someone even more independent. We're going to look at accessing them, memory seating, biometric repositioning, driving with power seat functions, quality of life, and remote seating app. So generally speaking, you'll come up with a joystick, right? And an individual will scroll through. So basically they pick their mode and they get into their chair mode, and then they're going to move the joystick till they find their power seat function, and then they'll use the joystick for a forward and back or a home and away. This is a multi-step process. Me explaining it took a long time. It might even be difficult for people to understand or remember how to get there. And so if you have fine motor limitations or cognitive impairments, it could be a problem. Users often report that the menu is just not fast enough. So what are our alternatives? We can just use switch access. We can use the ability to plug a switch in to a power seat function. Maybe it'd be tilt, maybe it would be recline, and we can work the switches that way. It could be a mechanical switch, it could be electronic. You could even use your head array to use the switches on there to access power seat functions. Another way that we can access them is through assignable buttons. The soft keys on the joystick can be reprogrammed to a particular function. So the speed button can be changed to the tilt, or, you know, the top left can be the tilt where the top right is the recline. And so you could take those keys and pretty much reprogram them to anything and any command. Another alternative is to use a power module, a control module. And so you can assign these buttons for either home and away or different power seat functions. And generally they can support up to 2 functions. And so this makes it really great opportunity, a great way to use what the existing technology that's on the chair with more quicker access to the power seat functions. Another way to improve your independence is with memory seating. Basically, memory seating are pre-programmed positions. And examples that we have here are the seated, the supine, pressure relief, feet above heart, the transfer, and elevate. Some of the things that we had talked about during the benefits of power seat functions. So these are specific positions that can be automated. And so out of the box, you might get these positions, but what we can do is we can really create memory positions. So we could take these positions and tweak them to the individual. We can reassign them, and so we can come up with our you know, top 6 favorite positions and have them programmed into the chair. So for me, again, I think about this in terms of how am I going to decide what programs I'm going to put into memory. And I go with either functional or physiological. So for functional positions, what is the person doing a lot during the day? Are they driving and they need to be a little bit elevated and fully out of tilt and forward a little bit, and this helps them see over the steering wheel and over the front of the car? Do they have a specific location for bed transfers? Or do they need that position of that we talked about for getting into the van? Is that a position that I can create? So functional activities during the day can be put into a memory position. Other ways are I need to get my feet above my heart and I want it to be at this particular angle, or you know, and so we can put those into memory as well. Or I get a spasm and I want to, it gets reduced by doing a full close up my angle and tilt back, or the reverse. So whatever works for them physiological, you can put into a memory position. So biometric repositioning, I love it. I think it's a great opportunity for individuals. So we made recommendations for a person to do those independent pressure reliefs, and their response is, I don't do them when I'm by myself, and because I slide out. So this biometric repositioning gives us an ability to increase the independence and reduce caregiver workload, because a person can then go through a series of movements to put them into a repositioning pressure relieving position. They can stay there for as long as they've been, has been advised, and then it takes us through a series of motions to get out of that. But what it does is it prevents that when you're returning from recline, it prevents that sliding from happening. And so all those repositionings that happen with the head support or the trunk support are eliminated because of the series of motions that we put, that it goes through. And so, like my clients, if they did this recline, I'd be, you know, felt like I needed to get behind them and help them get into another position, or they needed to tilt again. I tweak them with the pelvis. So this is like a power therapist, right? Is that it allows the person to get that pelvis and keep that pelvis where it needs to be so that they can resume their activities after a pressure relief. I would not just drop this off. I think it requires tweaking based on the angles and the tolerance of the movement. And so, you know, it's kind of weird to go through tilt and recline at the same time. So you kind of want to make sure that the person is comfortable with this when you're using it. But this is a great technology that really does increase independence. So what happens with power seat functions when with driving? All power seat functions, power chairs have inhibitions that are used with power seat functions at those extreme levels to provide safety and stability. Extreme tilt positions might go into creep mode or lockout mode. If you're elevated, you might go into a slow down mode. And how those inhibitions impact driving are important to consider when you're making decisions on what power seat functions and what you're going to recommend. So sometimes people want to use that seat elevated position when they're going across the street. But if I get into a creep mode that's too slow and I'm not making that light, it's something that I have to weigh. So you really want to make sure that the speed and the power seat functions are compatible. Or functionally, you're looking at this young man running with his sister in a high up thing. You want to make sure that he can participate with his peers in the positions that they want to be in. How does that reduction of speed impact that function, the safety? So independence. Light packages, not a power seat function, but I like to include it because it really does extend the benefits of using your power chair. If you can have the chair make you visible and make your environment visible, there's a greater likelihood that you're going to use that power chair. You want to be considerate of how someone is going to access it, whether it be one of those buttons that we talked about or how they're going to access it. And also for added security, they can be converted to, they can provide signals for safety. So that really does enhance a person's ability to use the power chair in the evening and long term. How does the technology now is great for controlling your environment from your chair. So you're sitting in the power chair and an added benefit of that control module is being able to power up your phone or your peripheral devices. And so that having a USB cord really just makes it that much more functional. Being able to use the Bluetooth technology that's in the power chair to connect to other technologies, connecting to that smart home, being able to control your television, your thermostat, your lights from your power chair. Awesome technology. And then just technology that connects to the smartphone, a tablet, being able to control your speech device via your joystick really does increase your independence. And lastly, I'd like to just touch upon the remote seating app. So we talked about that individual who was not doing pressure release based on our recommendations. And they come to you later on and they say, I'm getting a little redness. I'm not sure why. And you ask, are you doing your pressure release? And they say, sure. And you say, well, based on the fact that you gave me permission to monitor what you're doing, I see that you are not going into full tilt, or you're not staying back as much as we had discussed, or you're not doing it as frequently as we discussed. And we know that it isn't a desirable position. They go with that comfort position. So this is a way to provide feedback to somebody and work out a program that works. And if they say, I just forget. I forget to do my pressure relief. We can hook up a pressure relief plan that has alerts to monitor, to recommend or remind someone to do their pressure relief. And so this gives us some technology to connect and do a little bit of that remote patient monitoring that we all wish we were in the room with people. Basically, you have to get permission to get those reports, but it really is a great interactive tool with the clients. So, in summary, the idea would be that we know that we have clinical benefits from our power seat functions. We have the medical, the quality of life, and the functional benefits. We really want to be able to do a great feature match, really make sure that the benefits that we're recommending and the power seat functions that we're recommending are going to be used. We want to make sure that they're not adding maintenance and repairs or increasing the cost of the chair, and that they're going to be a great feature match. So the idea of understanding all of those clinical, medical, and functional benefits are used appropriately. There's so much out on the market, and being able to really do a great feature match is really what this is about. And so being able to compare those, balancing those costs and those benefits for good recommendations. So I hope everyone gained a little bit of something today, and I'm open for questions.
You got some great questions throughout, Linda. Awesome job. It's interesting, a lot of these different things. One of the reasons Linda actually didn't spend a ton of time talking about funding, because we did have a few funding questions from various countries, Linda, was simply because of that, right? Like, man, we never know what's going to necessarily be funded in various countries. What we will do, because the great thing is your email addresses are actually tied to your countries too. So if perchance you're looking for some recommendations for funding advice, or I don't know what the easiest way answer some of those funding questions, we will be sure to forward your email address and questions on to our colleagues in the other countries. For example, for our Canadians, you guys hopefully are familiar with the name Sheila Sherman, and you can forward some emails up there, and also Amy Bjornson over in Australia. So anyway, Linda, we did get a few questions related to funding, but I'm going to make sure I'm just going to kind of leave those off, and we'll just, because I can't tell what country they're from specifically on this, so we'll make sure we get to
and we also know that it's not even country, it's actually state by state.
Yeah,
so we'll
Medicaid, province, yeah, for sure. So, but let's get to some of the questions I think we probably have some time and ability for. We did got a couple of questions related to memory seeding and biometric repositioning, and can you spend a little bit of time going over the difference in those again, and talking about, when and why those might be good options for people, what are the differences between memory seeding and biometric repositioning?
Sure. So memory position is actually a dedicated position. It's something that you have determined an individual could benefit from having that programmed. So as we said, it could be a functional position. It could be a physiological position. It's something that's a point. It's a point. It's the end point. And so you want to be thinking about that in terms of programming those memory buttons with that. Biometric repositioning is a tool to use when somebody is going through a series of positions. It's essentially getting them into a pressure relieving position in one movement, right? And then returning. And it's the combination and the coordination of that process that, that biometric repositioning takes. So it really does, the advantage of using biometric repositioning is really almost that return position, so that the person doesn't you're not sliding out. And so for me, I just always think of the individual who really doesn't want to go into any of those other positions because they are fearful that they're not going to be able to have access to their technology or their trunk supports or their head. So even if they chose to recline, they could then go through the series of pressure relief to a position and then return through biometric repositioning. So it does really help to reposition you back into that spot. I hope that's clear.
Yeah, no, that was awesome. Thank you, Linda. A little bit more on memory seeding, because I had a couple people who were sending in some questions about like the preset positions, specifically what does the home position mean? How do you reprogram that? So I know we've both had experience with various brands of chairs throughout our career, but just I guess in particular, like is it possible to change those memory seeding, depending on which brand and model of chair that you have?
Well, absolutely, that you really want to look to see what your trusted advisor for that manufacturer is saying about the ability to change, and you also want to understand where that change is going to occur, right? So you have some preset memory positions that are coming out of the box, so to speak. And so those positions are kind of set. And if you want to do any reprogramming of them, let's just say you don't want to go into a full tilt, as they said, and you want to change it, make it a little bit less, someone doesn't tolerate it. You really want to work with your trusted advisor to see, can that be done in the clinic? Can it just be done with a switch? Does it need to have a programmer? Does it need to have the computer or PC programming done? And so each manufacturer will be able to advise you on that, but essentially there's going to be memory positions kind of out of the box that have been decided maybe by you when you ordered, but you may need some tweaking in the field. And again, maybe a person doesn't ever want to be just reclining, and so you want to incorporate that into another position. Or maybe a person doesn't want to be in a fully, the full position of a full tilt and recline and elevating is too much. You may want to change those angles. So there's a lot of tweaking, but you definitely want to consider having your trusted advisor there with you, because they know the chair best. But as you get more familiar with it, of course, that some of that stuff can be done in the field yourselves.
Mm-hmm. Here's actually a really good one that's coming in related to power mount. Goodness, it's late in the day over here for me. Elevating leg rest. So, do you have any recommendations on how you might choose between the individual power elevating leg rest versus a power center mount? Based on your experience, how do you decide?
I am. That's like the thorn in my side, if you want to know the truth, because I've gone the gamut of always working with elevating leg supports. Then they were breaking, so I went to power center mount, and then I've been back and forth. And so one of the things that you want to think about when you're going with that is, number one, the positioning, when we talked about that, but you also want to think about if you're going to be removing elevating leg supports and how quickly and what is the ease of doing that. And that was one of the things that was always frustrating to me is a client would want to remove them, and then they had so much trouble getting them back in. So you want to think about how they go back in. Are they going to be swinging them away? Are they going to just be lifting up the foot plate? And so this is really where you got your positioning, and you need to have your accessibility and your function be brought into that process of how that's going to happen. Yeah.
All right, we've got time for one more question, Linda. So I'm going to let you give your thoughts on this one. A little bit of a crystal ball might be needed for it to give you kind of a hint on this. Is a couple of questions about what happens if at the time of evaluation the client just needs tilt, but eventually you're thinking due to diagnosis or kind of predictions based on what you've seen in other clients with similar diagnosis or clinical presentations. What do you do? Do you just order tilt, or what are your options there if at the time of the eval they just need tilt?
Yeah, so I'm really very much about trying to order for the here and now, but based on our clinical judgment, we do know if someone's going to have a change or a progressive diagnosis, and they're going to have changes. And so those people, I would suggest making recommendations for the long term. Really, what are they going to need in the future? You do have some ability to change and do add-ons if you just had tilt and add on another actual. But really and truly, you want to try to be ordering for the now, but maybe if you have a good prediction of the future for a progressive disability, you would maybe want to then start thinking about the long term. And so even though right now a person doesn't seem to need the recline or the height elevator, you might want to start thinking about it. And then the other thing about future is that sometimes people don't even know what they're missing. And so the question might be asked of, would you like to have a power seat elevator? No, I've never needed that in the past, but then they get the opportunity to try it, and all of the doors that opens in terms of independence. So that's another thing about thinking about what their future is, or knowing that they're going to, they're going to have less reach in the future. And so you might want to be considering that now.
Awesome. All right. So what if people want to get a hold of you if they've got more questions that come about?
So here are my references, and feel free to, review those. And then if you have any additional questions, feel free to email me at linda.bollinger@sunmed.com, or any general questions about our series or about our resources, you can go to educationinmotion@sunmed.com.
Wow, power seat functions sure are powerful. I hope you enjoyed Linda's presentation. If you would like to access more valuable clinical resources such as this webinar, I encourage you to visit the Education in Motion portal on the Sunrise Medical website for even more valuable information, including additional webinars, printable resources, links to various industry websites and white papers, user case stories, and much more. Once again, thank you for watching, and if you have any questions or comments, do not hesitate to contact us at eim@sunmed.com.